Your seasoning cabinet could be hiding ingredients linked to cancer concerns, artificial dyes, hidden flavor enhancers, chemical anti-caking agents, and some of the biggest seasoning brands in America have been putting them into products people use every single day. The worst part, most families have no idea what they are really eating, so I spent days researching ingredient labels, company reports, and health concerns linked to America's biggest seasoning brands. And at the end of this video, I will show you the cleaner brands that are actually worth buying instead. Badia. Badia looks harmless, cheap prices, bright yellow caps, found in almost every grocery store in America. Millions of families use Badia seasoning every single day without thinking twice. But when people started reading the labels more carefully, one ingredient kept appearing again and again: silicon dioxide, a chemical anti-caking agent added to keep spices flowing smoothly for months on store shelves. Then came something even more disturbing. Reports and independent testing raised concerns about traces of heavy metals in certain spice products sold in the US spice market, including lead contamination concerns linked to some imported spices. And that is where people started asking dangerous questions. Where are these spices really coming from? How long have they been sitting in warehouses? And what exactly are families consuming every night at dinner? Because spices are not eaten once in a while. They are used every single day. Small exposure, over and over again, for years. And according to health experts, long-term exposure to certain contaminants and artificial additives may increase inflammation and raise serious health concerns over time, including concerns linked to cancer risk. The scariest part, most people never suspect the seasoning bottle sitting quietly in their kitchen. Accent. Accent seasoning has been sitting in American kitchens for decades. The small red and white bottle looks simple, almost harmless, but very few people realize what Accent actually is. Pure MSG, one single ingredient, monosodium glutamate, a flavor enhancer designed to make food taste stronger, richer, more addictive. And for years, people poured it into soups, meat, noodles, fried food, without ever questioning what it might be doing inside the body. Then concerns started growing around long-term MSG consumption and processed food additives. Some studies and health researchers raised questions about how excessive intake of flavor enhancers may contribute to chronic inflammation and oxidative stress inside the body, to conditions often discussed in connection with long-term disease risk, including cancer concerns. And the problem with Accent is not just how much people use, it is how often they use it. Day after day, meal after meal, for years. Open the container. The smell is sharp, artificial, powerful enough to hit instantly. Then comes the taste. Intense savory flavor before the real food flavor even appears. The scary part, millions of families still think Accent is just another harmless seasoning. Lawry's. Lawry's seasoning became famous in American kitchens decades ago. Backyard barbecue, grilled steak, fried chicken. The bright red bottle became part of family dinners across the country. But over time, people started noticing something different about the ingredient label. Anti-caking agents, artificial flavoring compounds, processed additives designed to keep the seasoning stable for long periods on store shelves. And that raised concerns about what families were really consuming every single day. Because seasoning is not eaten once in a while, it is used constantly, small amounts, breakfast, lunch, dinner, year after year. Some health researchers have raised concerns about ultra-processed flavor additives and long-term exposure to certain chemical compounds commonly found in heavily processed foods, including concerns connected to chronic inflammation and increased long-term disease risk, including cancer concerns. The scary part, millions of people still see Lawry's as an old-fashioned family seasoning brand, without realizing how different modern ingredient formulas may be from the original versions people grew up with. Morton season always marketed as the shortcut to flavor. One shake, one bottle, everything tastes better instantly, but that instant flavor comes with a hidden formula most people never stop to question. Salt-loaded seasoning, added sugar, processed flavor boosters blended together to create a taste powerful enough to overpower the real food underneath. And that is exactly why some consumers became concerned, because the more processed the flavor becomes, the more often people crave it. One sprinkle turns into two. Then every meal starts tasting bland without it. That cycle is what worried many health researchers studying ultra-processed food habits in America. Some experts have linked long-term consumption of heavily processed additives and excessive sodium intake to chronic inflammation inside the body, a condition often discussed alongside increased long-term disease concerns, including cancer-related concerns. Shake more than season all onto your hand. The powder falls perfectly, almost unnaturally smooth. No moisture, no clumps, even after months sitting on a shelf. That convenience may look harmless, but for many consumers, it became a symbol of how modern seasoning products are engineered more for shelf life and addictive flavor than real spice quality. And once people started realizing how much of their daily flavor came from processed seasoning blends, they began looking at the entire spice aisle differently. Old Bay. Old Bay is more than seasoning in America. It became part of seafood culture itself. Crab boils, shrimp baskets, summer cookouts. The yellow can become a symbol of tradition for generations. But behind that iconic label, some consumers started noticing ingredient changes that raised concerns. Anti-caking agents, preservatives, processed additives designed to keep the seasoning stable during large-scale distribution across the country. And once people started paying attention, the questions became harder to ignore. How fresh are these spices really? How long do they sit in warehouses before reaching kitchen tables? And what happens when processed seasoning becomes part of daily meals for years? Because Old Bay is rarely used lightly, people pour it onto seafood, fries, corn, eggs, popcorn, sometimes covering entire plates with it. Some health experts have raised concerns that long-term exposure to highly processed food additives and preservative compounds may contribute to chronic inflammation and cellular stress inside the body, conditions often discussed in connection with increased long-term disease concerns, including cancer-related concerns. Open a can of Old Bay and smell it closely. The first hit is intense, salty, sharp, almost overpowering before the natural spice aroma even appears underneath. That powerful processed flavor became one of the reasons many consumers started questioning whether modern seasoning brands are still built around real spice quality, or simply engineered for stronger shelf-stable flavor. And once people noticed the difference, the famous yellow can never look quite the same again. Tony Chachere's. Tony Chachere's became famous for one reason: bold Cajun flavor. The green container showed up everywhere from Louisiana kitchens to grocery stores across America. People loved it because the seasoning tasted powerful instantly, spicy, salty, rich, almost addictive after the first bite. But over time, consumers started looking closer at what was creating that intense flavor. MSG, processed flavor enhancement, high sodium levels, ingredients designed to make food taste stronger and more satisfying within seconds. And that is when concerns started growing around how often people were consuming it. Not once a week, every day. Chicken, seafood, fries, rice, eggs, one seasoning ending up on almost every meal. Some health researchers have raised concerns that long-term exposure to heavily processed flavor additives and excessive sodium consumption may contribute to chronic inflammation and oxidative stress inside the body, conditions frequently discussed in connection with increased long-term disease concerns, including cancer-related concerns. Shake Tony Chachere's into your hand and smell it closely. The flavor hits fast, sharp, aggressive, almost stronger than the actual food it is supposed to season. That intense flavor punch became the exact reason many consumers started questioning modern seasoning culture in America. Because when seasoning becomes more powerful than the food itself, people begin depending on processed flavor chemistry instead of real ingredients. And once consumers realized how often they were eating these additives, the green bottle suddenly looked very different. Mrs. Dash. Mrs. Dash built its reputation around one promise: healthy seasoning without salt. For years, millions of Americans trying to eat cleaner trusted that message completely. The brand became especially popular with people worried about blood pressure, heart health, and processed food ingredients. It looked like the safe option sitting on the grocery shelf. But then consumers started reading deeper into the ingredient labels. Maltodextrin, processed starch additives, flavor processing compounds designed to improve texture and shelf stability. and suddenly the healthy image around Mrs. Dash started raising uncomfortable questions. Because some health researchers have warned that heavily processed food additives may contribute to blood sugar spikes, chronic inflammation, and long-term metabolic stress inside the body, conditions often discussed alongside increased disease concerns over time, including cancer-related concerns. The most surprising part, many people using Mrs. Dash believe they were completely avoiding processed seasoning products. But open the bottle and smell it closely. The flavor feels unusually intense for a seasoning marketed as natural and healthy. That disconnect became impossible for some consumers to ignore. A product advertised as clean eating support, yet still relying on processed additives to maintain consistency and flavor. And once people realized that even health-focused seasoning brands may contain highly processed ingredients, trust in the spice all started collapsing fast. Goya, Spice Islands, McCormick. Three massive names in the American seasoning industry. Different packaging, different marketing, different audiences. But many consumers started noticing the same disturbing pattern hiding behind all of them. Processed additives, anti-caking agents, artificial flavor enhancement, long shelf life engineering designed to keep products stable for months or even years. Goya built its reputation through cultural trust, family recipes, home cooking, generations of loyal customers. But when people started checking ingredient labels more carefully, they found additives and artificial coloring compounds that raised serious concerns among health-conscious consumers. Spice Islands positioned itself as the premium option, higher prices, glass bottles, cleaner image. But many buyers were shocked to discover that some products still relied on processed anti-caking compounds similar to cheaper supermarket brands. Then came McCormick, the giant behind a huge portion of the spice aisle in America. Millions of homes use McCormick products every single day without realizing how many seasoning brands fall under the same corporate system. And that is where the fear started growing, because some health experts have raised concerns that long-term exposure to highly processed food additives, artificial coloring compounds, and chemical preservatives may contribute to chronic inflammation and cellular stress inside the body, conditions often discussed alongside increased disease concerns over time, including cancer-related concerns. Open almost any seasoning cabinet in America, and chances are one of these brands is sitting inside. The scary part, most people still believe they're simply buying spices, not heavily engineered processed flavor products designed for maximum shelf life and mass distribution. But here's the part most people never hear about. Not every seasoning brand is loaded with processed additives and artificial compounds. After researching labels, ingredients, and sourcing practices across the spice industry, a few brands stood out for a completely different reason: cleaner ingredients, stronger natural flavor, and fewer chemical additives hiding inside the bottle. And once you see how different real spices look and smell, you may never buy the cheap supermarket brands again. Opposite reason as the others. Not because of flashy marketing, not because of artificial flavor explosions, but because people notice something unusual the moment they open the bottle. Real aroma, strong garlic smell, deep cinnamon scent, rich paprika color that actually looked natural instead of chemically enhanced. Simply Organic became popular among health-conscious shoppers for using organic certified ingredients and simpler labels with fewer processed additives. Many consumers liked that the ingredient lists looked shorter, cleaner, easier to understand. Frontier Co-op built a reputation around transparency and sourcing. Some products include detailed information about origin and ingredient quality, and unlike many mass-market seasoning brands, consumers often describe the spices as fresher and more potent. Then came Penzeys Spices, a brand that developed almost a cult following among home cooks. People constantly talked about one thing: flavor intensity, not artificial intensity. Real spice flavor that hits naturally without needing overpowering chemical enhancement. And that became the biggest difference consumers noticed after switching away from heavily processed supermarket brands. Food suddenly tasted more natural, cleaner, less salty, less artificial. Some health-conscious consumers also preferred these brands because they often avoid many of the additives and processing compounds commonly found in mass-produced seasoning products. And once people experienced what fresher spices actually smell and taste like, many said they could never go back to ordinary grocery store seasoning again. If this video changed the way you look at your spice cabinet, hit subscribe right now. Because the next time you go grocery shopping, you're going to start noticing ingredients you ignored your entire life. And comment below, which seasoning brand are you throwing away first?